Hey everybody, Ed Homewood, Old Guy Hi-Fi channel. I hope everyone's doing well today. Look at this beautiful thing. This is the advanced Paris A12 Classic integrated amplifier, and man alive, is it cool. Sit back, relax, and we're going to talk about this really fascinating product. So what is the advanced Paris A12 Classic? Well, it is a $4,000 integrated amplifier, but it's more than that. It is really interesting product. It is rated at 190 watts by 2 into 8 ohms, 280 watts by 2 into 4 ohms. Very good specifications. I'll put them all up here. The things that make this interesting are it is very vintage in its design philosophy. When we look at the back panel, you'll see there's a million goes in and goes out and tons of flexibility and all kinds of different things that you can do. And that makes it really compelling. Also, too, from a standpoint of it being a digital front end, you could, I think I could live with this alone and just use the DAC inside. It uses a wonderful, now it's obviously Texas Instruments these days, but it is a Burr Brown PCM 1796. And that is a very famous 8-bit, beautiful DAC. Really smooth sounding. That's an overall characteristic of that, and we'll talk about it in a minute. This thing just is gorgeous the way it's built. We're going to take a look at the inside, and what I'd like to do now is let's go over the front panel, and we'll take a look at the back panel. We're going to take it over and put it on the bench. We're going to look inside, and I'm going to come back and tell you how I tested it, the music I used, and my thoughts. Well, here we are looking at the front panel of the advanced Paris A12 Classic. I'm going to go ahead and power it on. It's standby mode. Now it says warm up and it'll give us a countdown timer. Obviously it's preheating the tubes, so they're ready to go. On the front panel, we've got of course, our gorgeous, beautiful blue meters, the tubes in the middle with their lovely glow. We've got analog input, volume, and digital input, and I'll show you that in just a second as it counts down. 2 headphone jacks, 1/4 inch and 1 3.5 millimeter, and there's some settings on the back of the unit for the headphones, and I'll show you that when we turn it around. So here we're going to go warm up, and it'll bring us back to the last volume setting we were at, and the last input we were at. Now it said AES EBU, and it says unlock. It's looking for a digital signal to lock onto. There isn't one there because nothing's present right now. So as we move from here, obviously we've got our volume control, and there's some other status things. This is our analog input, and that'll show over here. So all of our analog inputs will come in on this knob. This is volume, obviously, and these knobs have a beautiful, smooth, slightly detented feel to them. Now this is your digital input, so all of your digital inputs will be here. Now this obviously your volume knob, and you'll see that over here. It is also a multifunction knob, so I push and hold it. It brings me into a menu for sys information, and I can go in and see about different versions on software and things. That's not going to be very important, but what I want to do is I want to go down here and I can choose speaker A or B. I can come in and do tone. So I can do bypass, which I have on right now. Let me do this, and then I can go in and do bass, treble, loudness, balance, all of that stuff right here. We'll go back out to, nope, we're going to go back out here to tone. Let me get out of there, here we go. And then we can do a volume set. So preset volume, a maximum or a startup volume you can set. APD is automatic power down. You can set it to turn itself off after 30 minutes or so. There's a variety of different settings. I didn't bother with it, but that's what it is. CEC is if you want to control the unit through the HDMI eARC system. TV audio, amp in, obviously for if you want to use it just as an amp. Reset, upgrade, and again back to system info. So this menuing system and multifunction thing, and then we're back to our default settings, is all controlled right here. As you can see, this thing is just beautiful. It's so lovely to look at and wonderful. So now we've seen the front, let's spin this thing around and look at the back side. Well, here we are looking at the back panel of the advanced Paris A12 Classic. This thing reminds me of an old school unit, not only build quality wise, but also just the numbers of goes intos and goes outs. So we're going to start over here on the left-hand side of the screen. Master power switch, IEC power socket, voltage selector. Right speakers A, right speakers B. Down here is our high bias switch, turn that on and off. We have 2 sub outputs with bass management. You can cross them over at either 75 Hertz or 150 Hertz. We have our balance pre-outs. We have trigger in and out. We have HDMI audio in, HDMI ARC in. We have an update USB, USB-A, and USB audio going into the DAC. We have our 2 sets of balanced inputs. We've got 3 sets of coax input, 3 sets of optical inputs. This little connector here is for the wireless Bluetooth module. You have an AS-EBU input, which I really like. You have an amp in and pre-out, so you can separate the two. Record out, that's a fixed line level. You have auxiliaries 1 through 4. So you have 4 line level inputs and a CD input, again, line level. Now on the phono side, this is interesting because it's moving magnet or moving coil, and you can choose moving coil high output, moving coil low output, or moving magnet. I have it set for moving coil low output, and you can set it for 100 picofarads, 200 picofarads, or 500 picofarads, grounding and input. Now the interesting thing is for the headphones, you can match the amplifier to the output impedance to your headphones. So if you need to do that, you can, and you can adjust the gain separately. And then of course, our left speaker terminals. Again, this thing is really well constructed, really well thought out. I love the flexibility of all the goes in's and goes out's. So now let's take it over and put it on the workbench and open it up and see what's inside. Well, here we are looking at the inside of the advanced Paris A12 Classic, and this thing is a beast. I barely got it on my desk, and I barely get it to fit within the viewfinder and the viewing range of the lens on the camera. You can see where this thing gets its 190 watts of channel, 2 huge toroidal power transformers, dual mono design, 6 output devices per channel, a total of 48,000 microfarads worth of capacitance. This thing is a beast, and it drove every speaker without problem, and I'll talk about that later. One of the things I find really interesting, up here at the front, you've got your meters. Obviously, you've got your front panel controls, and you've got your tubes. This is where the ECC 81s live. You could put 12 AT7s in it, but looking at this, I'm not sure I want to mess with it, so I didn't bother. One thing I thought was really interesting, rather than using ribbon cables, they actually used etched PC boards to make the connections from the front panels back to the business end of things. And speaking of the business end, let me scroll down here just a little bit. This is the digital section. So this is your HDMI eARC input. This is where your optical and coaxial SPDIF inputs come in. So this is the board handling all of that. And that little one right there, that's the Burr Brown PCM 1796. That's a beautiful DAC chip. Really, really good sounding. Anyway, so that's a look at the inside of this beast of an amplifier, the A12 Classic from Advanced Paris. I'm going to button this thing up. I'm going to get a forklift truck. I'm going to put it back in the studio. We're going to talk about how it sounds. Well, as you can see from looking inside, this thing is really well built. It is very old school in its build quality, and I think that's really cool. Now, obviously very new school with technology and modern components and all that other stuff, but beautiful DAC, amazing phono section, really wonderful unit. So how did I test it? Well, obviously I used it with a lot of normal stuff that you guys are used to seeing, although I've had some really cool stuff in. I ran it for a long time on the Opera Calais. That's a $6,000 stand mount speaker. I ran them on the AQ Canto 3s, which is about a $2,500 stand mount two-way. I used them with, and I have them right here, you can't see them, but the Sonor, and I don't remember the model name, I'll put it down here, but this is a $12,000 stand mount speaker. I used it with my big Wharfdales, and I used it as a standalone unit. So I used it at the moving coil, moving magnet phono preamp, and it works really well. Although I had a little bit of a mismatch with the moving coil, but on moving magnet, this thing sounded amazing. Beautiful sounding phono preamp. And once I kind of figured out on the moving coil, I got really good sound out of it. I used the internal DAC. It's got that Burr Brown PCM 1796. That chip is just amazing. It is lush and warm and detailed and gorgeous. And again, we'll talk about more of that in just a second. And of course, the tubes don't hurt that at all. And I listened to it long and hard and deep into the night and just for hours and hours and hours. I wound up doing the lion's share of my testing of this on the Opera Calais stand mount speakers because I have had those here longer and this, kind of time-wise corresponded with that. So now that I've talked about how I used it, why don't I talk about some of the music I used? Well, for those of you who don't like my music recommendations, I have put in chapters so you can skip ahead. Well, for those of you who stuck with me, thank you very much. The first album I want to talk about is this beautiful album from Beth Orton called Central Reservation. And this was released in 1999, and it is widely considered to be her landmark album. It is wonderful. It is really unique, and it kind of combines folk and electronica and trip hop and sort of acoustic singer-songwriter styles. It kind of cemented what they refer to, or what was dubbed her sound, was called folktronica, which is really unique. The album was really critically well received. It earned her actually a Brit Award nomination, a Mercury Music Award nomination. It kind of solidified her standing as one of the unique voices in late 90s alternative music. Now, the album was recorded in 3 different studios: Rack Studios, Matrix Studios, and the Church Studios, all in London. And there were 3 different producers. There was Victor Van Vogt, who worked with Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. There was Ben Watt, who was with a band, and you may remember back in the 80s, called Everything But the Girl. And he kind of did the more electronic acoustic fusion tracks. And then Beth Orton produced some of the album herself. She had a good backup band that featured Ted Barnes on guitar, and he was a longtime collaborator in her regular band. Ollie Friend, who was a bass player, and he played with a band called Red Snapper. You may remember them. Sean Reed on keyboards and backing vocals. Robert Hauer on guitar. He was from the band The Blow Monkeys. And then, of course, he had Ben Harper on slide guitar on the track Blood Red River. Now, there are some really notable tracks on it. I don't think there's a bad track in this entire album. Stolen Car, the opening track, is one of the most recognizable singles. It's kind of this acoustic guitar with kind of a beats thing and some subtle electronic textures. Really beautiful. My favorite track is Couldn't Cause Me Harm. And it blends this kind of mellow, acoustic-driven arrangement with subtle electronic production flourishes. It's a bit more groove-oriented than some of the other albums, kind of more ballad-type songs, but it's still anchored by her real expressive and very smoky vocals. Central Reservation is a standout album. It is just wonderful. It showcased her ability to balance organic folk storytelling with kind of electronic textures and her signature voice and songwriting. Again, her voice is very well detailed. This is an incredibly well recorded album. Now again, imaging and all that stuff is created in the studio, but each of the instruments and her voice were very, very well captured and just beautiful sounding, really wonderful sounding. So now let's talk about the next album I used. Well, the next album is very unusual. It's 5 hours long. This is what I listen to late at night. This is also what I listen to sometimes to give the systems I'm reviewing a real workout, because this will give your system a workout. It is the soundtrack to the electronic arts game Mirror's Edge Catalyst, and it's done by an artist named Solar Fields. His real name is Magnus Bergerson. He is well known as an ambient electronic composer, very, down-tempo, kind of cinematic music. He has a huge discography. I've used some of his music in other reviews. Just beautiful stuff. Now, this album, or this soundtrack, was designed obviously for the game. So there are parts of it where, first of all, there's some really amazing low bass. There's some really good kind of just ambient textures. Now, it images really well, but of course, that's all created in the studio, so it's all manufactured, but boy, is it fun to listen to. It's just got everything you want. It's down tempo, there's ambient, there's some real exciting sequences, which I imagine are probably related to chase or, high energy game sequences in the game. I have some younger family members who said that the soundtrack really makes the game more engaging. It's just a ton of fun to listen to. And like I said, it will give your system a workout. This is something I really enjoy listening to. I listen to it frequently. There's two versions of it. I've linked to the long version on Tidal. There is a short kind of, standard 60-minute or 62-minute length version, but the long version is really well worth it. And again, this will keep you company for hours and hours and hours. And I just find it so engaging. It's a ton of fun. So anyway, that album, the soundtrack to the electronic arts game, Mirror's Edge Catalyst by Solar Fields, aka Magnus Bergerson. Highly recommended. So now let's take a moment and talk about what I thought about this device. So what did I think of the advanced Paris A12 Classic? Well, I'll be dead honest with you. This could be an endgame amplifier for me. It absolutely could be. It could be for you as well. This thing is just amazing in its prowess to deliver music in just the most beautiful and detailed and smooth and engaging way. This thing, I tell you what, you turn it on, start listening to it, and it'll ask you to come play with it for hours, and you will have no problem doing so. I never, ever felt like there was any fatigue or any stridency to it. I never felt like I was missing anything. The bass was smooth and deep and effortless, no matter what speakers I asked it to drive. And I asked it to drive some pretty difficult speakers. The Opera Calais, $6,000 stand mounts. The AQ Canto 3s, that's a $3,000 stand mount. My big Wharfdales, and I'm going to show you real quick here. I apologize for this. This is a $12,000 Sonor bookshelf speaker, and this drove those beautifully. But for the lion's share of my review, I did use it on the Opera Calais. I've had those here a long time, and I just got the Sonors in. So with the Calais, this thing, I never felt like it was straining at all. Just effortless delivery of power with the sense of a ton of power on reserve. In the low frequencies, the bass, and again, a lot of it this is the speaker's ability to reproduce it, but it's also the ability of the amplifier to deliver that signal to the speaker so it can do what it does. And this thing delivered such good bass and such good power to the Opera Calais that they just effortlessly reproduced all the bass frequencies, mid-bass. I mean, they're limited a little bit on the low end, but I never felt like I needed to turn on a subwoofer. It was that good. Through the mid-bass, just good rhythm, good pace, good textures, good nuance, good detail. Drum kit sounded wonderful. The snares sounded beautiful. When we got into the vocal range, Beth Orton's voice sounded so rich and so beautiful. Just all the detail was there, but none of the stridency. Even though sometimes on that album there's a little bit too much reverb on her voice, it never really was, you know, stood there and shouted at you, listen to the reverb. It just kind of blended in, and it was really beautiful. All through the mid-range. Super detailed, super smooth. Leans toward the warm side, but not rounding off notes, not taking the edge off anything. Those edges were really well defined. So transients, with the power this thing has, they were unlimited. They would go as high as whatever the music was, you know, however it was recorded, and the decays hung just beautifully in the air with beautiful detail in it. All of that texture and all of that tone was just there for as long as you can imagine. You could just hear those decays going off into the distance. Sense of room, sense of imaging. It provided, again, this is providing an absolutely wonderful signal to the speakers, and then the speakers can do what they do. But this thing never got in the way, and I never felt like I was ever pushing it hard. No matter how hard I listened to it, or no matter what load I asked it to drive, I swear to God, you could jumpstart a diesel off this thing. It's got that much power. Just wonderful, wonderful. I really enjoyed it, and it really engaged me. So how does it compare to some of the other integrateds I've reviewed? Well, compared to the Cambridge Edge A, this is actually warmer, I think, and a bit smoother. They're both very similar in their imaging characteristic. They're both very similar in that they seem to have limitless power. I think I would prefer this over the Cambridge Edge A. It's got a little bit more energy in the mids and upper frequencies. Not harsh, but just a little more energy, and this was a little smoother. Compared to the Rogue FiiO 2. That's an interesting piece in that it's a Class D hybrid with that long play 12AU7 mu follower preamp. This has obviously 12 AT7s or ECC81s in it actually. So preamp, you know, a tube preamp with a Class A, B output. I would give the nod to this. The Rogue had tons of power, very effortless, but I think it was maybe a little too much of that kind of Class D sheen to it. This is just warm and detailed and beautiful and just right in my wheelhouse sonically. How would I compare it to the Hagel H590? Well, the Hagel H590 is Vesuvius. It's a volcano. That thing has a limitless amount of power as an integrated amplifier. I think it's the most powerful one I've ever heard. It is just effortless power on it, but from a sonic standpoint, the Hagel is beautiful, but it's very clean. It's very sterile, very, I don't know, crisp. It is listenable, but I think I would prefer this. Again, the warmth and the detail of this, that smoothness is really kind of what's in my wheelhouse. Now, how would I compare it to my everyday amp, which is close in price, which is the Evo 150? This is a little warmer. The Evo 150 is an amazing piece. I don't know. If push came to shove, I'd probably swap out the Evo for this if I had room in the rack. It's so big, I don't know if it'll fit in there. This is really that good. Although I'm really sick. Now, let me put it this way. They are different. I don't know that the difference makes one better than the other. I could live with either, and I obviously live with the Evo 150. I could live with either. You know, there is, honestly, in all of this stuff, there is no best. People ask, you know, what's the best speaker? You know what the best speaker is? The one you like. You know what the best amplifier is? The one you like. So all I'm giving you is my subjective opinion. This thing is just beautiful. I could live with it forever. I can live with my Evo forever. I could live with the Cambridge Edge A forever. There's no better, it's just different. And if that difference is of value to you, then that's how you make your judgment on it. Anyway, so wonderful piece. Again, endgame piece it could be an endgame piece for me, it could be an endgame piece for you. $4,000, it probably should be if you're gonna spend that kind of money, but it delivers, it absolutely does. What a wonderful unit, highly recommended. Well, that's the Advanced Paris A12 Classic, wonderful piece. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you'd be willing to give me a like and your subscription. Your subscription does help the channel a lot, as does your view. As the channel is growing, more and more manufacturers are willing to send me gear for review and so forth. And I've had some great conversations this week, and I've got some cool stuff on the way. And I got some really cool stuff I'm looking at over there. And you saw a little hint of the $12,000 Sonos speakers. It's because of your views and your subscriptions that helps me with that. So thank you so much for that. If you wish to join the channel, there's a membership link in the pinned comment and in the video description. There will be a link to Skylab's Audio in Des Moines, Iowa, Kevin Mall. He's a great guy and a good friend. He is an authorized advanced Paris dealer, and he can ship to you in the contiguous 48 states, no problem. Reach out to Kevin. It's nice to support a small family business like Kevin's. So anyway, there'll be a link in the pinned comment and in the video description on that. There are affiliate links in the video description. There are links to these two albums there. There are some other playlists there. There's a link to the Community Post playlist. Please check that out. There's some great stuff there. Comment. Let me know what you think. Where are you at? What kind of sound do you like? Are you kind of in the same ballpark as me? The smooth, really detailed, kind of warm sound, very engaging? Or do you like something a little more detailed or, bigger bass or whatever? Let me know in the comments. As you guys know, I try to respond to every comment, but when I get a comment, the length of War and Peace, it's a little bit hard to go through all of those and respond. So if we can keep them concise and brief, that would be wonderful, and I thank you in advance for that. So I think that's everything I need to say. Great piece, absolutely great product. So again, like, subscribe, comment if you wish to. I turned it off. You can follow me on Instagram. My name's Ed Homewood. This is the Old Guy Hi-Fi channel, and it is now your duty to yourself, your obligation, to go put on some beautiful music, sit back, relax, and just let the cares of the day wash away and just enjoy your time with your music. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.